Marcus Webb pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway of Riverside High School. The wheels made a squeaking sound that echoed in the silence. It was 11 o'clock at night and everyone had gone home hours ago. This was Marcus's favorite time. No students running around. No teachers asking him to clean up spills. Just him, his mop, and the quiet building. He had been working as a night janitor at this school for 7 years now. 7 long years of mopping floors, emptying trash cans, and cleaning bathrooms. Most people did not even notice him. Students walked past him in the hallways like he was invisible. Teachers sometimes said hello, but they never really looked at him. He was just the janitor, the man who cleaned up their messes. Marcus was 42 years old. He had short black hair that was starting to turn gray at the sides. He wore the same dark blue uniform every night with his name tag pinned to his chest. His hands were rough and calloused from years of hard work, but his eyes were kind. When he smiled, which was not very often these days, small lines appeared at the corners of his eyes. The town of Millbrook was not what it used to be. Marcus had lived here his whole life, and he remembered better days. When he was young, the town was full of life. The big textile mill at the edge of town employed hundreds of people. Families had good jobs. Stores on Main Street were always busy. People knew their neighbors and helped each other. But 5 years ago, the mill closed down. The owners said they were moving the business to another country where labor was cheaper. Just like that, half the town lost their jobs. Marcus's brother had worked at the mill for 15 years. So had his neighbor. So had the father of 3 students at the high school. After the mill closed, everything changed. Families struggled to pay their bills. People had to move away to find work. Stores on Main Street shut down one by one. Now there were empty buildings with broken windows and faded signs. The town that once felt like a big family now felt broken and sad. The high school reflected what was happening in the town. Students were angry and divided. Rich kids whose parents still had good jobs looked down on the kids whose families were struggling. Different groups formed and did not talk to each other. There were fights in the hallways. Teachers seemed tired and stressed. The school used to have a great music program, but it was cut 3 years ago because there was no money in the budget. Marcus understood the pain. He had his own struggles. His mother had been sick for many years before she passed away 2 years ago. Taking care of her had cost so much money. That was why he worked as a janitor, even though he had once dreamed of a different life. He did not talk about his past much. People did not ask and he did not share. But Marcus had a secret, a big secret that nobody at the school knew about. Tonight was a cold November evening. Marcus could hear the wind blowing outside as he cleaned the third-floor classrooms. He wiped down desks, swept the floors, and emptied the trash cans. The same routine he did every night. But something felt different tonight. He felt restless, like there was something pulling at his chest. After he finished the 3rd floor, Marcus pushed his cart down to the 2nd floor. He cleaned the science labs in the library. Then he moved to the 1st floor. He cleaned the cafeteria, which always took the longest because students were messy eaters. He scrubbed tables and mopped the sticky floor. By midnight, he was almost done with his work. But instead of finishing his usual route, Marcus found himself walking toward the east wing of the building. This was the old part of the school that was not used much anymore. The classrooms here were mostly empty. At the end of the hallway was a large set of double doors. Above the doors, a faded sign read Auditorium. Marcus stood in front of the doors. He had not been inside the auditorium in months. There was no reason to clean it very often since nobody used it anymore. The school held assemblies in the gym now. The auditorium just sat there, dark and forgotten. He pushed open the heavy doors. They creaked loudly. Inside it was dark except for the dim light coming through the high windows from the streetlights outside. Marcus felt along the wall and found the light switch. He flipped it on and the overhead lights buzzed to life. The auditorium was big. There were rows and rows of old red seats that folded down. Many of them were broken or had stuffing coming out. The walls were painted a dull beige color that was peeling in places. A stage sat at the front of the room with thick red curtains that looked dusty and worn. Marcus walked down the center aisle between the seats. His footsteps echoed in the empty space. He climbed the steps onto the stage. Dust particles floated in the air, visible in the dim light. The stage was empty except for a few music stands pushed against the wall, and something large covered with a gray sheet in the center. He walked over to the covered object. He knew what it was. His heart beat faster as he reached out and grabbed the corner of the sheet. With one motion, he pulled it off. Dust flew everywhere, making him cough. There it was, the grand piano. It was a beautiful instrument, even covered in dust. The wood was dark and polished, though dull now from years of neglect. Marcus ran his hand along the smooth surface, leaving a clean streak in the dust. This piano had not been played since the music program was cut from the budget 3 years ago. It just sat here, forgotten like so many things in this town. Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest. He looked at the piano keys. They were yellowed with age, and some had dust settled between them. He pulled out the bench and sat down. The bench was wooden and uncomfortable, but it felt strangely like coming home. He placed his fingers on the keys but did not press down yet. His hands were shaking slightly. These hands that spent every night mopping floors and scrubbing toilets. These rough, calloused hands that people thought could only push a mop and empty trash. Nobody knew what these hands could really do. Marcus took a deep breath. Then he pressed down on one key. The sound was slightly out of tune, but it was still beautiful. He pressed another key, then another. Slowly, he began to play a scale. His fingers remembered the movements even after all these years. He had not played a piano in over 20 years. Not since he was 19 years old and had to drop out of the community college music program. His mother had gotten sick and the medical bills were too much. His father had left when Marcus was young, so it was just him and his mom. He had to work full-time to take care of her. His dream of becoming a musician died that year, but the music never left him. All these years, while he worked and struggled and watched his town fall apart, the music stayed in his head. He composed songs in his mind while he mopped floors. He heard melodies while he emptied trash cans. The music was always there, waiting. Now sitting at this forgotten piano in this empty auditorium, Marcus felt something break open inside him. All the sadness he had been carrying. All the loss. His mother's death. His abandoned dreams. The broken town he loved. It all came pouring out through his fingers. He began to play a melody that had been living in his head for months. It started soft and sad, like the sound of rain falling on empty streets. The notes spoke of loss and loneliness. They told the story of a town that once thrived but now struggled. They captured the feeling of walking down Main Street and seeing empty stores with broken windows. But then the melody changed. It became stronger. There was still sadness in it, but also something else. Hope, determination, the will to keep going even when things were hard. The music spoke of people who did not give up, of families who stuck together through tough times, of small acts of kindness that happened even in dark days. Marcus's fingers moved faster across the keys. Some notes were still slightly out of tune, but it did not matter. The emotion behind the music was real and powerful. Tears started running down his face, but he kept playing. He played for his mother who had suffered so much. He played for his brother who lost his job at the mill. He played for the students at this school who were angry and hurting. He played for his broken town that he still loved with all his heart. The music filled the empty auditorium. It echoed off the walls and rose to the high ceiling. For the first time in years, this forgotten space was alive with sound. Beautiful, heartbreaking, hopeful sound. Marcus did not know how long he played. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. Time seemed to stop. There was only the music and the emotions flowing through him. When he finally played the last note, he sat there with his hands still on the keys, breathing hard. His face was wet with tears. The silence that followed was heavy. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He looked around the empty auditorium, suddenly feeling embarrassed even though nobody was there to see him. What was he doing? He was just a janitor. He had no business playing this piano. He needed to finish his work and go home. But something had shifted inside him. Playing that music had felt like taking a deep breath after being underwater for too long. It had felt necessary, like his soul needed it to survive. Marcus stood up from the bench. He carefully covered the piano with the sheet again, patting it smooth. Then he turned off the stage lights and left the auditorium, pulling the heavy doors closed behind him. He finished his cleaning route, but his mind was elsewhere. The music still echoed in his head. As he locked up the building and walked to his old car in the parking lot, he felt different. Lighter somehow. The November air was cold and his breath made clouds in front of his face. He got in his car and started the engine. As he drove through the quiet streets of Millbrook toward his small apartment, he passed the closed stores on Main Street. He passed the dark mill building with its broken windows. He passed houses where he knew families were struggling. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt something other than sadness when he looked at his town. He felt that small spark of hope that had been in his music. Maybe things could get better. Maybe beauty could still exist in broken places. Maybe his music mattered even if nobody ever heard it. When he got home to his small apartment, Marcus made himself a cup of tea and sat by the window. He lived alone now that his mother was gone. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. But in his head, the music still played. He knew he would go back to that piano. Maybe tomorrow night, maybe the night after. But he would go back. The music had been locked inside him for too long. Now that he had let it out, he could not stop. He needed to play. He needed to create. Even if nobody ever knew. Even if he remained invisible to everyone around him. Marcus Webb, the night janitor that nobody noticed, had a gift. And in the days to come, that gift would change everything. Not just for him, but for the entire town of Millbrook. Though he did not know it yet, his secret music would do something amazing. It would remind people of what they had forgotten. It would bring them together. It would show them that even in the darkest times, beauty and hope could still exist. But that night, Marcus just sipped his tea and looked out the window at the sleeping town. Tomorrow he would go back to being invisible. He would push his cart and mop floors and empty trash. But tomorrow night, when everyone was gone and the building was quiet, he would return to that forgotten auditorium. He would uncover that dusty piano, and he would play. The music was calling him. And this time, Marcus Webb was going to answer. Marcus returned to the auditorium the next night. And the night after that, and the night after that, it became part of his routine. First, he would clean the entire school like he always did. Then around midnight, when all his work was done, he would walk down that hallway to the old auditorium. He would turn on just enough lights to see the piano. He would remove the dusty sheet, and he would play. Each night the music was different. Sometimes it was slow and sad. Sometimes it was angry and loud. Sometimes it was soft and gentle like a lullaby. Marcus played whatever he was feeling. He played the emotions that he carried inside him all day while he worked. The music became his way of speaking when he had no words. The piano was old and some keys were out of tune, but Marcus did not mind. He actually started bringing tools from home to fix it little by little. He tightened loose keys. He cleaned the dust from inside. He polished the wood until it started to shine again. Taking care of the piano felt good. It was like taking care of a friend who had been forgotten. 3 weeks after Marcus started playing, something happened that he did not expect. It was a Tuesday night in late November. Marcus was playing a piece he had composed about his mother. The melody was sweet but sad, like remembering someone you loved who was gone. He was so focused on the music that he did not hear the door to the auditorium open. Outside in the hallway, Jake Morrison was walking toward the exit. Jake was 17 and the captain of the basketball team. He had stayed late for practice, and now he was the last one in the building. At least he thought he was the last one. As he walked past the auditorium, he heard something that made him stop. Music. Piano music. Beautiful piano music coming from inside the dark auditorium. Jake stood very still, listening. Who was playing? The music program had been cut years ago. There were no music teachers at the school anymore. And it was almost midnight. Who would be here playing piano at this hour? He pressed his ear against the door. The music was so beautiful it made his chest feel tight. It reminded him of his grandmother who had died last year. She used to play piano for him when he was little. Listening to this mysterious music brought back those memories so strongly that tears came to his eyes. Jake did not open the door. He did not want to interrupt whoever was playing. He just stood there in the hallway listening until the music stopped. Then he heard footsteps on the stage and the sound of something being moved. Quickly, Jake walked away before whoever was inside could see him. As he drove home that night, Jake could not stop thinking about the music. Who was the mysterious piano player? And why were they playing alone in the middle of the night? 2 days later, it happened again. This time it was Sarah Chen, a junior who was part of the school's drama club. She had stayed late working on sets for a play. As she left the building, she heard the piano music drifting through the empty hallways. She followed the sound to the auditorium. Like Jake, Sarah stood outside the door and listened. The music was different tonight. It was stronger and more hopeful. It made her think of sunrise after a long night. It made her feel like maybe things could get better. Sarah had been feeling depressed lately. Her parents had been fighting a lot at home. Money was tight since her dad's hours got cut at work, but this music made her feel something she had not felt in a while. Hope. Sarah told her friend Michelle about the mysterious piano music. Michelle told two other friends. Soon a small group of students knew about it. They started calling the unknown player the ghost pianist because nobody could figure out who it was. The following week, Tom Williams discovered the music. Tom was the night security guard who worked part-time at the school 3 nights a week. He was making his rounds when he heard the piano coming from the auditorium. Tom was a big man in his 50s with a gray beard. He had worked at the textile mill before it closed. Now he worked 3 different part-time jobs to make ends meet. Tom opened the auditorium door just a crack and peeked inside. The lights were dim and he could only see a figure sitting at the piano on the stage. The person was too far away to identify. Tom watched for a minute, then quietly closed the door. He decided not to say anything. Whoever was playing was not hurting anything, and the music was too beautiful to interrupt. But Tom did tell his wife about it when he got home. His wife told her sister. Her sister told her book club. Soon, more people in the town of Millbrook knew about the mysterious piano music at the high school. By early December, word had spread throughout the community. The local newspaper, the Millbrook Daily, ran a small article with the headline, "Mysterious. Piano music heard at Riverside High." The article talked about how students and staff were reporting beautiful piano music coming from the old auditorium late at night. Nobody knew who was playing. The school principal, Helen Chen, said she was looking into it but had no answers yet. The article caught people's attention. In a town where nothing exciting ever happened anymore, this was something interesting to talk about. People started going to the high school at night, parking in the lot or standing outside the building, hoping to hear the mysterious music. Marcus had no idea any of this was happening. He came to work each night, cleaned the school, and then played his piano in the empty auditorium. He thought he was completely alone. The auditorium had thick walls and he always closed the doors. He never imagined that people could hear him. One cold Thursday night in December, Marcus was playing a particularly emotional piece. It was a song about loneliness and the feeling of being invisible. As he played, about 15 people were gathered outside the school. They stood in the parking lot, their breath making clouds in the cold air. They could hear the faint sound of piano music drifting from the building. Among the people outside was Maria Santos. She owned the Riverside Diner on Main Street, one of the few businesses still open in town. Maria was 60 years old with kind brown eyes and gray hair she kept in a bun. She had lived in Millbrook her whole life and had seen the town rise and fall. Standing in the cold, listening to this mysterious music, Maria felt tears on her cheeks. Next to her stood Robert Chang, who used to work at the mill. He had been unemployed for 3 years and was working odd jobs to support his family. The music reminded him of better times. It made him feel less alone in his struggles. There was also young Amy Patterson, a sophomore at the high school. Amy was quiet and did not have many friends. She often felt invisible, just like Marcus. But hearing this music made her feel connected to something bigger than herself. People did not talk much as they listened. They just stood together in the cold December night, united by the mysterious, beautiful music. When the music stopped after about 30 minutes, people slowly got in their cars and drove home. But something had changed. For those 30 minutes, they had not felt so alone. They had not felt so broken. They had shared something beautiful together. This started happening every night. Word spread quickly through the town. More and more people came to the high school parking lot to listen to the mysterious piano player. By the second week of December, there were sometimes 30 or 40 people gathered outside. Maria Santos had an idea. She started staying open late at her diner so people could get hot coffee and snacks before going to listen to the music. Her business, which had been struggling, suddenly had more customers. People would come to the diner around 10:30 at night, buy coffee, and then drive to the school. In the diner, people talked about the music and tried to guess who the mysterious pianist might be. Some thought it was a student. Others thought maybe a teacher. Some believed it really was a ghost. The mystery made it even more exciting. At the school, Principal Helen Chen was getting pressure to solve the mystery. Parents were calling. The school board wanted answers. Who was playing the piano? How were they getting into the building? Should they be concerned about security? Helen Chen was 55 years old and had been principal of Riverside High for 10 years. She was a serious woman who cared deeply about her students and her school. This mysterious piano situation was frustrating. She had checked the security cameras, but they did not cover the auditorium very well. She had asked the staff if anyone knew anything. Nobody did. She tried going to the school late at night herself to catch the pianist, but every time she went, there was no music. It was like the pianist knew when she was there. Helen did not know that Marcus could see cars pulling into the parking lot from the auditorium windows. On nights when he saw her car, he simply did not play. The mystery of the ghost pianist became the biggest story in Millbrook. The local news station came and did a report about it. They interviewed people standing outside the school listening to the music. They talked to Principal Chen. The story was picked up by a regional news network, and suddenly people from other towns knew about the mysterious piano player of Millbrook. For the first time in 5 years since the mill had closed, Millbrook was known for something positive. The town had something to be excited about, something to talk about that was not sad or depressing. Something else started happening too. People who had not spoken to each other in years were standing next to each other in that parking lot, listening to music together. Old neighbors who had fallen out were reunited. Parents met other parents from their kids' school. The music was bringing people together. Jake Morrison, the basketball player who had first heard the music, started a group with other students to try to solve the mystery. The group included students from all different social circles, rich kids and poor kids, popular kids and quiet kids, athletes and artists. They all worked together, interviewing staff and investigating the school. For the first time in years, these different groups were cooperating instead of fighting. Sarah Chen, who had been feeling depressed, started writing poetry inspired by the music. Her English teacher, Mrs. Roberts, was so impressed that she asked Sarah to share her poems with the class. Other students liked them so much that Sarah started a creative writing club. The mysterious music had sparked something creative in her. Marcus knew none of this. He continued his routine, unaware that he had become the most talked-about person in Millbrook, even though nobody knew it was him. He just came to work each night, cleaned the school, and poured his heart into his music. The music itself was changing too. As December went on, Marcus's compositions became more hopeful. They still had sadness in them, but also beauty and strength. His playing was getting better too, since he was practicing every night. His fingers were remembering skills he thought he had lost 20 years ago. One night, Marcus played a piece that was all about resilience, about getting knocked down and getting back up, about people who kept going even when life was hard. As he played, 40 people stood outside in the freezing cold listening. Some were crying. Some were smiling. All of them felt something stirring inside, a reminder that they were stronger than they thought. Among the crowd that night was Pastor James from the community church. He was inspired to give a sermon that Sunday about hope and community. The church had more people attend than it had in months. Also in the crowd was David Lee, who owned a hardware store that was barely staying in business. Listening to the music, David decided not to give up. He would find a way to keep his store open. His store was part of the town's history, and the town needed it. The mysterious piano music was doing something amazing. It was waking up Millbrook. It was reminding people of who they used to be and who they could be again. It was showing them that beauty could still exist even in hard times. The town council noticed the change. They held a meeting in mid-December to discuss the effect the mysterious pianist was having on the community. Council member Ruth Garcia stood up and said, "I have not seen our town come together like this in 5 years. Whatever is happening, we should support it." The council agreed. They voted to hold a town hall meeting after the holidays to discuss bringing back arts programs to the school. Maybe they could find money in the budget. Maybe they could get donations from the community. The mysterious pianist had reminded them what they had lost when they cut the music program. At the Millbrook Daily newspaper, editor Frank Wilson was amazed at what was happening. His newspaper had been on the verge of closing. Nobody was buying papers anymore. But since the ghost pianist story started, subscriptions had increased. People wanted to read updates about the mystery. Frank was able to keep his staff employed. A mysterious piano player had literally saved his newspaper. As Christmas approached, the nightly gatherings outside the school grew even larger. Sometimes 50 or 60 people showed up. They brought blankets and thermoses of hot chocolate. Parents brought children. Elderly people came. Everyone was welcome. On the night of December 23rd, Marcus played his most beautiful piece yet. It was a song about Christmas, but not the commercial Christmas of presents and shopping. It was about the real meaning, about love and hope and light and darkness, about family and community and taking care of each other. As he played, snow began to fall outside. Light, gentle snowflakes drifted down on the crowd of people standing in the parking lot. In that moment, with the beautiful music and the falling snow, something magical happened. People felt connected. They felt hope. They felt like maybe, just maybe, Millbrook could come back. Maybe they could rebuild their town together. An elderly woman named Grace Murphy was in the crowd that night. She had lived in Millbrook for 70 years. She had seen the town at its best and watched it fall apart. Standing there in the snow, listening to the mysterious music, Grace whispered to herself, "We are going to be okay." And somehow everyone around her felt the same thing. Marcus finished his piece and sat at the piano in the quiet auditorium, unaware that outside 57 people were standing in the snow with tears in their eyes, changed by his music. He covered the piano with its sheet, turned off the lights, and left the auditorium. As he walked through the empty hallways pushing his cleaning cart, he had no idea that everything was about to change. He had no idea that Principal Chen had a plan to finally catch him. He had no idea that his secret was about to be revealed to everyone. But for that night, Marcus Webb was still invisible, still the janitor that nobody noticed, still the man with a secret that was somehow healing a broken town. The change in Millbrook was real and growing stronger every day. It started with the nightly gatherings outside the school, but soon it spread to every corner of the town. People were talking to each other again. They were helping each other. The mysterious piano music had done something that 5 years of town meetings and community programs could not do. It had reminded people that they belonged to something bigger than themselves. Maria Santos noticed it first at her diner. The Riverside Diner had been struggling for years. After the mill closed, she had to let go of 2 waitresses and cut her hours. She thought about closing down completely. But then the mysterious pianist started playing, and everything changed. People started coming to her diner before going to listen to the music. At first, it was just a few customers buying coffee, but as word spread, more people came. They would sit at the counter or in the booths, drinking coffee and eating pie, talking about who the mysterious pianist might be. The diner became the unofficial meeting place for piano music listeners. Maria started baking more. She made her famous apple pie and chocolate cake. She put up a chalkboard where people could write their guesses about the pianist's identity. The guesses were all wrong, of course. Nobody thought it could be the janitor. But the game was fun and brought people together. One evening in early December, something special happened at the diner. Robert Chang came in for coffee before heading to the school. Robert was the man who used to work at the mill and had been unemployed for 3 years. He looked tired and defeated. He sat at the counter and Maria poured him a cup of coffee. At the other end of the counter sat Patricia Hayes. Patricia's husband had been Robert's supervisor at the mill. When the mill closed, there had been some bad feelings. Some workers blamed the supervisors for not doing more to save their jobs. Robert and Patricia had not spoken in years, even though they lived on the same street. That night at the diner, they looked at each other. Maria held her breath, wondering if there would be a problem. But then Patricia got up and walked over to Robert. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked quietly. Robert looked up, surprised. Then he nodded. "Sure." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Patricia said, "My husband lost his job too, you know. He was management, so everyone thinks we were fine. But we were not. We lost our savings. We almost lost our house." Robert looked at her with new understanding. "I did not know that. I thought you all got big severance packages." Patricia shook her head. "No, we got the same as everyone else, nothing." They started talking. Really talking. About what they had both lost. About how hard the last 5 years had been. About their fears for the future. By the end of the conversation, they were not enemies anymore. They were 2 people who had suffered the same loss. Maria watched from behind the counter with tears in her eyes. This was happening because of the music. The mysterious piano player was breaking down walls between people. Similar things were happening all over town. At the high school, the change was even more dramatic. Students who had not spoken to each other were suddenly working together. Emma Rodriguez was a 17-year-old senior who had been thinking about dropping out of school. Her family was struggling badly. Her dad worked 2 jobs, but it was still not enough. Emma felt guilty going to school when she could be working to help her family. She felt like education was a luxury they could not afford. She felt hopeless about her future. But then she heard the mysterious piano music. She went to the school parking lot one night with her best friend Lisa. Standing in the cold, listening to those beautiful notes floating through the air, something changed inside Emma. The music spoke to her. It said that even in dark times there was still beauty. It said that hope still existed. Emma felt inspired to write about what she was feeling. She started writing poetry late at night after her shift at the fast food restaurant where she worked part-time. The poems poured out of her. Poems about struggle and pain, but also about resilience and hope. Poems about a town that refused to die. Her English teacher, Mrs. Roberts, noticed that Emma seemed different. She was more engaged in class, more focused. One day, Mrs. Roberts asked Emma to stay after class. "Is everything okay, Emma?" Mrs. Roberts asked with concern. Emma hesitated, then pulled out her notebook. "I have been writing," she said shyly. "Would you read something I wrote?" Mrs. Roberts read Emma's poem about the mysterious pianist. It was beautiful and powerful. It captured the feeling of the whole town. Mrs. Roberts had tears in her eyes when she finished. "Emma, this is incredible," she said. "Would you be willing to share this with the class?" Emma was nervous, but she agreed. The next day she read her poem to the class. The room was completely silent as she read. When she finished, several students were crying. Even the popular kids who usually did not pay attention to anything were moved. A boy named Tyler raised his hand. "That was amazing," he said. "I have been writing songs. Maybe we could collaborate." A girl named Jessica spoke up. "I draw. I could illustrate your poems." Suddenly, students were talking excitedly. They wanted to create things. They wanted to express themselves. Mrs. Roberts was amazed. She had been teaching for 20 years and had never seen her students so inspired. Emma started a creative writing and arts club. They met twice a week after school. Students from all different groups joined. Rich kids, poor kids, athletes, nerds, popular kids, quiet kids. None of that mattered anymore. They were united by their creativity and their love for the mysterious music that inspired them. The club started a project. They created a book of poems, stories, drawings, and songs, all inspired by the mysterious pianist. They made 50 copies and sold them to raise money for the school. The book sold out in 2 days. They had to make more. Jake Morrison, the basketball captain, joined the club even though he had never written anything creative before. He wrote a short story about a superhero who saved people not with strength, but with music. It was not great literature, but it came from his heart. The other club members encouraged him and helped him improve it. In Jake's regular life, something else was changing too. The basketball team had been divided all season. The players from wealthier families looked down on the players whose families were struggling. There were arguments and fights. The team was losing games, but Jake noticed that 3 of his teammates were part of the creative writing club now. They had something in common beyond basketball. They had the mysterious music and the art it inspired. Jake called a team meeting and talked to everyone about working together, about being a real team. Maybe it was the influence of the music, or maybe people were just ready for change, but the team listened. They started playing better together. They started winning games. Principal Helen Chen watched all of this happening and felt amazed. The school felt different. There was less fighting in the hallways. Students seemed happier. Teachers reported that students were more engaged, all because of mysterious piano music that nobody could explain. But Helen had a job to do. The school board was pressuring her to find out who was playing the piano. They were concerned about security. What if it was someone dangerous? What if they were vandalizing the school? Helen did not think the pianist was dangerous, but she understood their concerns. She needed to solve this mystery. Helen came up with a plan. She would hide in the auditorium and wait for the pianist to arrive. She had tried coming to school late before, but the pianist seemed to know when she was there. This time she would hide in the afternoon before the pianist arrived. She would stay hidden in the auditorium storage room all evening if necessary. She would catch the mysterious piano player. While Helen was making her plan, the rest of Millbrook was waking up in other ways. The town council held a meeting about bringing back arts programs. The meeting room was packed with citizens who wanted to speak. Pastor James spoke about how the music had increased attendance at his church and brought the congregation closer together. This music has done more for our community's spirit than anything else in 5 years, he said. David Lee, the hardware store owner, stood up. I was going to close my store, he said. I had given up. But this music reminded me that we do not give up. I am keeping my store open, and I want to donate money to help bring back the music program at school. One by one, people stood up and pledged to help. Business owners offered donations. Parents volunteered their time. By the end of the meeting, the council had commitments for enough money to start a small music program at the school. It was not much, but it was a beginning. Ruth Garcia, a council member, wiped her eyes. 5 years ago, the mill closed and we all fell apart, she said. We stopped being a community. We became strangers living in the same town. But now, because of this mysterious pianist, we are remembering who we are. We are remembering how to help each other. Whatever happens, we cannot lose this feeling. Everyone in the room agreed. They did not know that the person responsible for all this change was a man they passed in the hallways without noticing, a man who cleaned their buildings and emptied their trash, a man named Marcus Webb. The local newspaper continued to grow. Editor Frank Wilson was able to hire back one of the reporters he had to let go. The drama club, which had almost disbanded due to lack of interest, suddenly had more members than ever. They decided to put on a play about a community coming together. The play was written by students inspired by what was happening in their own town. Even the teachers felt different. They met for coffee at Maria's Diner and talked about their students with hope instead of frustration. They shared ideas for making their classes more engaging. They felt renewed energy for teaching. Mrs. Roberts, the English teacher, partnered with Emma to help other students who wanted to write. She stayed after school twice a week to work with the Creative Writing Club. For the first time in years, she felt like she was making a real difference. At night, the gatherings outside the school grew larger. By mid-December, sometimes 70 or 80 people showed up. They brought lawn chairs and blankets. Some brought thermoses of soup to share. It became like a nightly community party, except quiet and respectful because everyone was there to listen to the music. Neighbors who had not spoken in years found themselves standing next to each other, sharing a blanket against the cold. Old friendships were renewed. New friendships were formed. People exchanged phone numbers and made plans to help each other. Someone's car broke down? 3 people offered rides. Someone lost their job. Others shared information about job openings. Someone was sick? Neighbors brought food. The music was bringing out the best in everyone. It reminded them of who they wanted to be. It reminded them that they needed each other. Grace Murphy, the 70-year-old woman who had lived in Millbrook her whole life, became something of a leader among the nightly listeners. She organized a schedule so people could bring hot drinks to share. She made sure elderly people had chairs to sit on. She knew everyone's name and made sure newcomers felt welcome. One night, a family who was new to Millbrook showed up. They had just moved to town because housing was cheap, but they did not know anyone. Grace welcomed them immediately. You are part of us now, she said with a warm smile. Welcome home. The mother of the family started crying. She had been so worried about moving to a new place where they did not know anyone. But here were all these people standing together in the cold, united by mysterious, beautiful music. She felt like she really had found home. The mysterious pianist himself still had no idea about any of this. Marcus continued his routine. Clean the school, then play the piano. He was improving every night, and the music was becoming more complex and beautiful. He poured everything into those compositions. All his pain, all his hope, all his love for his broken town. Sometimes while he played, Marcus thought about his mother. She had believed in his musical talent when he was young. She had encouraged him to study music at the community college, even though they could not really afford it. When he had to drop out to take care of her, she cried and apologized. Do not give up on your music, she had said. But he did give up. He had to. There was no choice. Now, playing in this empty auditorium night after night, Marcus felt like he was finally honoring his mother's wish. He was not giving up on his music. Even if nobody knew, even if he stayed invisible forever, he was being true to himself. He was being the musician his mother always believed he could be. On December 20th, something happened that Marcus did not notice. The auditorium storage room door was slightly open. Inside that storage room, Principal Helen Chen sat on a folding chair in the darkness, waiting. She had been there since 5 o'clock that afternoon. It was now almost midnight. She heard Marcus's cart squeaking down the hallway. She heard him enter the auditorium. She heard him walk across the stage. She heard the sheet being removed from the piano. And then the music began. Helen sat in that dark storage room, barely breathing, listening. The music was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. It was emotional and powerful. It told a story of struggle and survival, of loving something even when it was broken, of hope that refused to die. Tears ran down Helen's face as she listened. She understood now why everyone was so moved by this music. It spoke to something deep inside the soul, something that words could not reach. After about 30 minutes, the music stopped. Helen heard the sheet being placed back over the piano. She heard footsteps walking across the stage. This was her moment. She had to see who the mysterious pianist was. Helen stood up slowly, her legs stiff from sitting so long. She opened the storage room door as quietly as she could. She stepped out onto the stage. And there, covering the piano with the dusty sheet, was Marcus Webb, the night janitor. The invisible man that everyone passed in the hallways without a second thought. Marcus must have heard her footsteps because he turned around. His eyes went wide with surprise and fear. For a long moment, they just stared at each other in the dim light of the auditorium. Helen saw the tears on Marcus's face. She saw his rough, calloused hands that had just created such beautiful music. She saw the fear in his eyes, like a child caught doing something wrong. "It is you," Helen said softly. "It has been you all along." Marcus did not know what to say. He had been caught. His secret was out. He expected to be fired or arrested for using the school property without permission. He waited for her to yell at him to tell him to leave and never come back. But Helen did not yell. Instead, she walked closer to him. Her face was kind and full of wonder. "Marcus," she said gently, "do you have any idea what you have done? Do you know what your music has done for this town?" Marcus shook his head, confused. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I should not have been playing the piano without permission. I will stop. Please do not fire me." Helen smiled through her tears. "Fire you? Marcus, you have brought this community back to life. Your music has united people who have not spoken in years. It has given hope to students who had given up. It has reminded everyone what is important. You are not in trouble. You are a miracle." Marcus did not understand. He had no idea that people had been listening. He thought he was alone. Helen sat down on the edge of the stage and motioned for Marcus to sit next to her. Then she told him everything. About the crowds gathering outside every night. About Maria's diner becoming a community gathering place. About Emma's creative writing club and Jake's basketball team. About the town council voting to bring back arts programs. About old enemies becoming friends again. About a whole town waking up from 5 years of grief and despair. As Marcus listened, he could not believe what he was hearing. His secret music had done all that. His private expression of pain and hope had changed people's lives. But how, he asked. "I thought I was alone." Helen explained about the thick walls of the auditorium and how sound traveled through the old building. About how people could hear the music faintly outside. About how they came every night just to listen and feel connected to something beautiful. Marcus put his face in his hands. He felt overwhelmed. He had just been trying to survive, trying to keep his music alive inside him. He never imagined it could matter to anyone else. "Marcus," Helen said gently, "I need to ask you something. Will you give one public concert? Will you let Millbrook see the face behind the music?" Marcus looked up, terrified. "I am just a janitor," he said. "I am nobody. People will be disappointed." "No," Helen said firmly. "You are not just a janitor. You are an artist. You are the person whose music saved this town. And people need to know that beauty and talent can come from anywhere, from anyone. You need to let them see you." Marcus was scared. He had been invisible for so long, but deep inside he felt something else too. A spark of the young man he used to be, the one who dreamed of being a musician. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to be seen. "Okay," he said quietly. "I will do it." Helen smiled. "Thank you, Marcus. This is going to change everything." She had no idea how right she was. The next morning, Principal Helen Chen sat in her office trying to figure out how to handle the situation. She had discovered the identity of the mysterious pianist. Now she needed to tell people, but how? Marcus Webb was a private man. He was terrified of the attention. She needed to do this carefully. Helen called Marcus on his cell phone. He answered nervously, probably worried she had changed her mind about not firing him. "Marcus, I want you to know that your job is completely safe," she said first. "You are not in trouble. But we need to talk about the concert. Are you still willing? Yes, Marcus said quietly. I am scared, but yes. Good, Helen said. I am thinking Christmas Eve, that is 4 days away. We will have the concert in the auditorium. I will announce it today. Is that okay? Marcus's heart was pounding. 4 days. He had 4 days before everyone would know his secret. Okay, he managed to say. Marcus, people are going to want to know about you. About your life, your story. Are you willing to share that? Marcus thought about his mother, about his lost dreams, about 20 years of cleaning floors while music played in his head. Yes, he said. I will share my story. After she hung up with Marcus, Helen made some calls. First, she called the school board to explain the situation. Then she called the local newspaper. Editor Frank Wilson almost fell out of his chair when Helen told him the truth. The janitor? Frank said in amazement. Marcus Webb. I see him at the school all the time. He is just a janitor, Helen finished for him. That is exactly the point, Frank. We all walked past him every day and never really saw him. But he has been creating something beautiful this whole time. Frank immediately saw the power of this story. The invisible man who saved his town with music. This was not just a local story anymore. This was national news, maybe even international. Can I interview him? Frank asked. Yes, Helen said. But be gentle. He is very private and nervous about all of this. By noon, Helen had written a letter to the community. She posted it on the school website on social media and gave copies to the newspaper. The letter read, Dear Millbrook community, I am writing to share news about our mysterious pianist. After weeks of investigation, I have discovered the identity of the person whose beautiful music has brought our community together. His name is Marcus Webb, and he is the night janitor at Riverside High School. For the past several weeks, Marcus has been playing the piano in our auditorium after completing his cleaning duties. He had no idea that anyone could hear him. He was simply expressing himself through music, creating beauty in private moments. Marcus has agreed to give one public concert on Christmas Eve at 7 o'clock in the evening in our school auditorium. Everyone is welcome. There will be no charge. But we ask that you come with open hearts and minds. Marcus's story is one of dreams deferred but never forgotten. It is a reminder that talent and beauty can come from anywhere, from anyone. It is a reminder that we should never judge people by their job titles or overlook them because they seem invisible. I hope you will join us on Christmas Eve to celebrate Marcus and to celebrate what his music has meant to our community. With gratitude, Principal Helen Chen. The news spread through Millbrook like wildfire. People could not believe it. The mysterious pianist was Marcus Webb, the quiet janitor, the man they passed in the hallways without noticing. At Maria's diner, the lunch crowd was buzzing with the news. Maria herself was shocked. Marcus came into her diner sometimes for a cup of coffee before heading to work. She had served him 100 times, but never really talked to him. He was just another customer. Now she found out he was the person whose music had saved her business. Robert Chang sat at the counter shaking his head in wonder. I worked on the same cleaning crew as Marcus for a few months a couple of years ago, he said. He was always quiet. He did his work and kept to himself. I had no idea he could play piano, no idea he had this gift. Patricia Hayes, sitting next to Robert, said softly, How many other people do we overlook every day? How many other Marcus Webbs are there, with gifts we never see because we do not look? The question hung in the air. Everyone in the diner felt it. They had all been guilty of not seeing Marcus, of treating him like he was invisible, and he had been creating something beautiful the whole time. At the high school, students were amazed. Jake Morrison, the basketball captain, remembered seeing Marcus cleaning the gym after practices. He never thanked him, never even acknowledged him. Now he found out this man was the mysterious pianist who had inspired him to write his first story. Emma Rodriguez felt tears in her eyes when she heard the news. Marcus was a janitor, someone people looked down on, someone society treated as less important, but his music had changed her life. It had saved her from dropping out of school. It had given her hope and inspired her to write. How could someone so important be treated as invisible? That afternoon, Emma went to find Marcus. She learned he lived in a small apartment building on Oak Street. She knocked on his door, nervous but determined. Marcus opened the door, surprised to see a student at his home. He recognized Emma from the hallways. Can I help you? He asked. Mr. Webb, my name is Emma Rodriguez. "I am a student at Riverside High. I just wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" Marcus was confused. "For what?" "For your music," Emma said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I was going to drop out of school. I felt hopeless. But then I heard you playing and something changed inside me. Your music gave me hope. It inspired me to write. You changed my life and I needed you to know that." Emma pulled out her notebook and handed it to Marcus. "These are poems I wrote because of your music. I wanted to give them to you." Marcus took the notebook with trembling hands. He opened it and read the first poem. It was beautiful and raw and full of emotion. He read another, and another. By the fourth poem, he was crying. "You wrote all of these?" he asked. Emma nodded. "Your music showed me that beauty can exist even in hard times. That hope is real. I wanted to create something beautiful too." Marcus looked at this young girl who had come to his apartment to thank him. He had thought of himself as nobody, as invisible, but his music had touched her life in a profound way. Maybe Helen was right. Maybe what he did mattered. "Thank you for sharing these with me," Marcus said, handing back the notebook. "They are wonderful. Keep writing, Emma. The world needs your voice." After Emma left, Marcus sat in his small apartment feeling overwhelmed. His secret was out. Everyone knew now. Part of him wanted to run away and hide, but another part of him felt something he had not felt in 20 years. Pride. Not arrogant pride, but the quiet pride of knowing his work mattered. The phone started ringing. It was Frank Wilson from the newspaper asking for an interview. Marcus agreed, though his hands shook as he held the phone. Frank came over that evening with a photographer. He asked Marcus to tell his story. At first, Marcus spoke quietly, struggling to find words. But as he talked about his mother and his lost dreams and the music that had always lived inside him, the words came easier. "I never thought anyone would hear me play," Marcus said. "I was just trying to survive. I was trying to keep the music alive inside me. I did not know I could make a difference." Frank wrote everything down. The photographer took pictures of Marcus in his small apartment, sitting by the window where he often sat thinking about music. They took pictures of his rough, calloused hands. They took a picture of him holding Emma's notebook of poems. The article ran the next day on the front page of the Millbrook Daily. The headline read, "The Invisible Man, How Janitor Marcus Webb United a Broken Town Through Music." The article told Marcus's whole story. His dreams of being a musician, having to drop out of college to care for his sick mother. 20 years of working as a janitor while music played in his head. The decision to finally let the music out by playing the forgotten piano. The article included quotes from people Marcus had affected. Emma talked about how his music inspired her writing. Jake talked about how it helped his basketball team come together. Maria talked about how the gatherings at her diner had saved her business. Pastor James talked about renewed faith and community at his church. The article ended with an invitation to the Christmas Eve concert and a powerful statement from Frank himself. Marcus Webb reminds us that we are surrounded by people with gifts we never see, because we do not take the time to look. He reminds us that every person has value and dignity, regardless of their job title or social status. His music has healed our town. Now it is our turn to see him, to honor him, and to learn from him. The article was shared online. By the end of the day, it had been read by tens of thousands of people. Regional news outlets picked it up. Then national news. By the next morning, Marcus Webb's story was being talked about all over the country. News crews came to Millbrook. They interviewed Marcus, Helen Chen, students, townspeople. They filmed the empty auditorium where Marcus had played. They captured the small town that had been changed by one man's secret music. Marcus was overwhelmed by the attention. He agreed to do a few interviews because Helen said it would help promote the concert and support for the arts program. But mostly he stayed home, trying to process everything that was happening. People from all over started sending messages of support. Other janitors and custodians wrote to say that his story made them feel seen and valued. Musicians wrote to praise his talent and courage. Teachers wrote to say they would never overlook their school support staff again. A famous concert pianist named David Chen saw the news story and was moved. He called Principal Helen and offered to donate a new grand piano to the school. Marcus Webb should have a proper instrument to play, David said. And Riverside High should have a music program again. A music company offered to record Marcus and distribute his compositions. A publisher wanted to write a book about his life. Marcus declined most of these offers. He did not want fame or money. He just wanted to play music and keep his job as a janitor, the job that gave him dignity and purpose. But he did agree to one thing. A music school in the city offered him a scholarship to complete his music degree, taking classes online so he could keep working. Marcus cried when he got the offer. His dream that he thought was dead 20 years ago was coming back to life. In Millbrook, preparations for the Christmas Eve concert began. The auditorium had to be cleaned and prepared. The piano had to be tuned properly. Chairs had to be set up. Volunteers came from all over town to help. Grace Murphy, the elderly woman who had been organizing the nightly gatherings, took charge of decorations. She and a team of volunteers hung lights and greenery. They made the old auditorium look beautiful for the first time in years. Emma's creative writing club made programs for the concert. They included Marcus's story and some of Emma's poems. They printed 500 programs, not sure if that would be enough. The high school drama club volunteered to be ushers. The basketball team helped set up chairs. Even the town council members came to help paint and clean. Everyone wanted to be part of this special event. As Christmas Eve approached, Marcus felt more nervous every day. He would be playing in front of hundreds of people. They would all be looking at him. He would not be invisible anymore. The thought terrified him. On the evening of December 23rd, Helen Chen called Marcus. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Scared," Marcus admitted. "What if I mess up? What if people are disappointed?" "Marcus, you have been playing beautifully for weeks," Helen said gently. "Nothing will change just because people are watching. Play from your heart like you always do. That is all anyone wants." "But what if they expect more because now they know my story? What if I let everyone down?" Helen was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that Marcus would never forget. "Marcus, you have already given this town more than we deserve. You have given us hope and unity and beauty. Even if you played one note tomorrow and then walked off the stage, you would still be a hero. But I know you will not do that. You will sit at that piano and you will pour your heart out like you always do, and we will be grateful for the gift." Marcus felt some of his fear ease. She was right. He just needed to play like he always did, from his heart. That was all. The next morning, Christmas Eve, Marcus woke up early. He could not sleep anyway. He drank his coffee and looked out the window at the town he loved. Snow was falling gently, covering everything in white. It looked peaceful and beautiful. He spent the day quietly. He did not go to work because Helen had given him the night off. He practiced a little on the old keyboard he had bought years ago, but rarely used. He reviewed the pieces he planned to play. He tried not to think about the hundreds of people who would be watching him. As evening approached, Marcus put on his best clothes. He did not have a suit, but he had a clean pair of dark pants and a button-down shirt. He looked at himself in the mirror. He looked nervous, but he also looked ready. Helen had offered to let him wear different clothes for the concert. She even offered to buy him a new suit. But Marcus had declined. "I am a janitor," he said. "That is part of who I am. I do not want to pretend to be someone else." Instead, Marcus made a decision. He would wear his work uniform, the dark blue janitor's uniform with his name tag. He would not hide who he was. He would not pretend. He would stand in front of his town as Marcus Webb, night janitor and musician. Both parts of him were real and important. At 6:30, Marcus drove to the high school. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. As he pulled into the parking lot, he saw something that made him stop and stare. There were hundreds of cars. The parking lot was completely full. People were parking on the street and walking toward the school. Marcus sat in his car watching people stream into the building. Old people and young people, families with children, teenagers, business owners, teachers, students. His whole town was coming to hear him play. He took a deep breath. This was it. His life would never be the same after tonight. He would never be invisible again. Part of him mourned that loss, but another part of him felt ready to finally be seen. Marcus got out of his car and walked toward the school, wearing his janitor's uniform with pride. As he walked through the doors, his journey from invisible janitor to celebrated musician was about to reach its most important moment. The concert that would change everything was about to begin. Marcus Webb stood backstage in the old auditorium, listening to the sound of hundreds of people finding their seats. His heart pounded so hard he thought everyone must be able to hear it. He looked down at his dark blue janitor's uniform. His hands were shaking. He wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Principal Helen Chen came backstage and put a hand on his shoulder. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. Marcus shook his head. "I do not think I can do this. There are so many people." "Look at me, Marcus," Helen said. He looked up at her kind face. "You have been playing for weeks. Tonight is no different except that people can see you. Play like you always do. Play from your heart. That is all you need to do. What if I forget the music? What if my hands freeze up? Then you stop, take a breath, and start again," Helen said. "Nobody expects perfection. They are here because your music touched their hearts. They are here to honor you and to say thank you. Just be yourself." Out in the auditorium, the scene was remarkable. Over 800 people had crowded into a space meant for 500. Every seat was full. People stood along the walls and sat in the aisles. The fire marshal had come by earlier and said this was a safety violation, but then he looked at all the hopeful faces and decided to let it go just this once. Maria Santos sat in the third row with her husband. She had closed her diner early so she could come. In all the years she had owned the Riverside Diner, she had never closed on Christmas Eve. But this was more important. Emma Rodriguez sat with her family. Her father had taken off work from both his jobs to be here. Emma clutched her notebook of poems to her chest. She was so nervous for Marcus, this man who had changed her life without even knowing it. Jake Morrison sat with his basketball team. All of them had come together, wearing their team jerseys to show unity. They wanted Marcus to see that his music had helped them become a real team. Robert Chang and Patricia Hayes sat next to each other. The two former enemies who had become friends again, because they stood together listening to mysterious music on cold nights. Tonight they would see the face behind that music. Grace Murphy, the elderly woman who had organized the nightly gatherings, sat in the front row. At 70 years old, she had seen a lot in her life, but she had never seen her town come together like this. Tonight felt like a miracle. Pastor James was there with his entire congregation. The mayor and town council members sat together. Teachers from the school filled several rows. Students from Emma's creative writing club sat in a group. Frank Wilson from the newspaper was there with his photographer. News crews had cameras set up to film the concert, but mostly the auditorium was filled with regular people from Millbrook. People who had lost their jobs when the mill closed. People who had been struggling and hurting. People who had forgotten how to hope. They had all come to honor the man whose music had reminded them they were not alone. At 7 o'clock exactly, the house lights dimmed. The stage lights came up. Principal Helen Chen walked onto the stage. The crowd applauded. Helen waited for them to quiet down, then spoke into the microphone. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she said. "A few weeks ago, our town was touched by mystery and beauty. Someone was playing piano in this auditorium late at night, and the music reached out into our community and changed us. We searched for the identity of this mysterious pianist. We wondered who could create such beautiful music. And then we discovered the truth." Helen paused, looking out at the crowd. "The person who has been playing for us, the person whose music has united our town and given us hope, is someone we all know. Someone we have all seen. But he is also someone we never really looked at. Someone we treated as invisible even though he was always there, keeping our school clean and taking care of our building." Helen's voice became emotional. "Marcus Webb is the night janitor at Riverside High School. He is also a gifted musician who had to set aside his dreams 20 years ago to take care of his sick mother. He has worked hard every day, cleaning our floors and emptying our trash while beautiful music lived inside his head. He never complained. He never asked for recognition. He just did his work with dignity and kept his music alive in private moments." Many people in the audience were already crying. They thought about all the times they had walked past Marcus without really seeing him. All the times they had treated him as less important because of his job. "Tonight," Helen continued, "Marcus has agreed to play for us publicly for the first time. He is nervous and scared, but he is also brave. He has agreed to let us see him, really see him, so that we can say thank you. So please welcome Marcus Webb." The applause was deafening. People stood up clapping and cheering. Marcus heard it backstage and felt tears running down his face. He wiped his eyes and took a deep breath. This was it. He walked out onto the stage. The crowd fell silent for a moment, just looking at him. There stood Marcus Webb in his janitor's uniform, his name tag pinned to his chest. His eyes were red from crying. His hands were rough and calloused. He looked terrified. Then the applause started again, even louder than before. People were not just clapping. They were giving him a standing ovation before he had even played a note. They were honoring him for his courage, for his gift, for his years of invisible service. Marcus stood there, overwhelmed. He had spent so long being invisible that being seen like this felt strange and scary and wonderful all at once. He nodded to the crowd, then walked to the piano. The auditorium fell completely silent. You could hear people breathing. Marcus sat down at the piano bench. He placed his shaking hands on the keys. He closed his eyes and took 3 deep breaths. Then he began to play. The first piece was the one he had played that very first night, weeks ago. The piece about loss and struggle, about a town that had been broken. The melody was sad and beautiful. It captured all the pain that Millbrook had been through. As Marcus played, something amazing happened. His hands stopped shaking. The fear went away. There was only the music. He forgot about the hundreds of people watching. He forgot about the cameras and the news crews. He forgot about being nervous. He was just Marcus playing his music, expressing his heart through his fingers. In the audience, people listened with tears streaming down their faces. Maria Santos thought about her struggling diner and how close she had come to giving up. Robert Chang thought about losing his job and his dignity. Patricia Hayes thought about her husband's shame and depression. Emma Rodriguez thought about almost dropping out of school. The music spoke to all of them. It said, "I know you have suffered. I know it has been hard. I see you." When the first piece ended, there was a moment of silence. Then applause filled the auditorium. Marcus looked up, surprised. He had forgotten they were there. He smiled shyly and prepared to play his second piece. The second piece was different. It started sad like the first one, but then it changed. It became stronger, more hopeful. This was the music Marcus had been playing in recent weeks. Music about resilience, about people who get knocked down but get back up. About choosing hope even when things are dark. Jake Morrison felt the music in his chest. He thought about his team and how they had learned to work together. He thought about the short story he had written, the first creative thing he had ever done. The music had done that for him. Grace Murphy closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. She had been so worried about her town, but tonight, looking around at all these people coming together, she knew Millbrook was going to be okay. They had remembered how to be a community. The second piece ended to even louder applause. Marcus played a third piece, then a fourth. Each piece was different, but all of them were beautiful and emotional and real. Then Marcus spoke into the microphone for the first time. His voice was quiet and shaky. "Thank you for being here," he said. "I want to play one more piece. This one is new. I wrote it this morning. It is about all of you, about how you listened in the cold and dark, about how you came together, about how you reminded me that my music matters, about how you made me feel seen." He began to play. This piece was different from all the others. It had sadness in it, but also joy. It had struggle in it, but also triumph. It told a story of hope and community and love. It was Marcus's way of saying thank you to the town that had given him a reason to stop hiding. The music built to a powerful climax, with Marcus's fingers flying across the keys. Then it softened, becoming gentle and peaceful. It ended with a single note that rang out in the silent auditorium, then slowly faded away. For several seconds, nobody moved. They just sat there, absorbing what they had experienced. Then Emma Rodriguez stood up and started clapping. Others joined her. Soon everyone was standing, applauding, many of them crying openly. The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. Marcus sat at the piano, overwhelmed by emotion. He had never imagined this. He had spent 20 years being invisible, and now hundreds of people were celebrating him. He stood up and bowed, tears streaming down his face. But then something happened that Marcus did not expect. Emma Rodriguez walked up onto the stage. She was carrying her notebook. She approached the microphone nervously. "Mr. Webb," she said, her voice shaking, "your music inspired me to write. Would it be okay if I read one of my poems? I wrote it about you and what you have done for our town." Marcus nodded, too emotional to speak. Emma opened her notebook and began to read. He walked among us unseen. His hands rough from years of work, his heart full of music nobody heard. We passed him in the hallways. Never looking, never seeing, never knowing that beauty lived inside this man we called invisible. But late at night when we were sleeping, He played his heart out to empty walls, and somehow the music found us, reached through the cold and darkness, reminded us of who we were, showed us that hope still existed, that beauty could bloom in broken places. He taught us that we should never judge a person by their title, that dignity comes from within, that everyone has gifts we cannot see unless we take the time to look. Thank you, Marcus Webb, for your music and your courage, for showing us that the invisible people are often the most important ones, and that one person's gift can heal a community's deepest wounds. By the time Emma finished, there was not a dry eye in the auditorium. Marcus walked over to her and hugged her. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for seeing me." Then something else happened. Jake Morrison came onto the stage. "Mr. Webb, I want to apologize," he said into the microphone. "I passed you in the hallways hundreds of times. I saw you cleaning up after our basketball practices. I never thanked you. I never even looked at you. I am sorry. You deserved better." More students came onto the stage. One by one, they apologized for not seeing Marcus, for treating him as invisible, for not recognizing his value. They thanked him for his music and for teaching them an important lesson. Teachers came up too. Mrs. Roberts spoke about how Marcus had inspired her students to be creative. Mr. Davidson talked about renewed interest in art. The principal thanked him for bringing the community together. Then business owners came forward. Maria Santos announced that she was donating money to start a scholarship fund in Marcus's name for students who wanted to study music but could not afford it. David Lee from the hardware store pledged to match her donation. One by one, other business owners and community members pledged money. Within 30 minutes, they had raised over $50,000 for music scholarships and to restart the music program at Riverside High School. Marcus stood on the stage, completely overwhelmed. He could not believe what was happening. His simple act of playing piano in an empty auditorium had started all of this. But the surprises were not over yet. Principal Helen Chen returned to the microphone. "Marcus, I have something to tell you. Do you remember David Chen, the famous concert pianist who donated a new grand piano to our school?" Marcus nodded. The new piano was beautiful and sat on the stage right now, waiting to be officially unveiled. "Well, David has another gift for you," Helen said. "He would like to say it himself." "David, are you here?" An older Asian man stood up from the audience and walked onto the stage. Marcus recognized him from television and recordings. David Chen was one of the most respected pianists in the world. David shook Marcus's hand. "Mr. Webb, I was deeply moved by your story," he said into the microphone. "You remind me why I became a musician. Not for fame or money, but because music is essential to the human soul. You kept your music alive through 20 years of struggle. That takes real dedication and love." David paused, then said, "I would like to offer you something. My music foundation gives grants to talented musicians who need support. I would like to give you a grant of $20,000. You can use it to complete your education, to buy instruments, to do whatever you need to pursue your music." The audience erupted in applause. Marcus could not speak. $20,000? That was more money than he had ever imagined having. "And one more thing," David continued. "I would be honored if you would consider studying with me. I do not take many private students anymore, but I would love to work with you. Your compositions are remarkable. With some training in music theory and technique, you could be an extraordinary composer." Marcus found his voice. "I am just a janitor," he said quietly. "No," David said firmly. "You are a janitor and a musician. Both are important. Both give you dignity. Never be ashamed of honest work, but also never hide your gift. The world needs your music." More applause filled the auditorium. Marcus was crying too hard to respond. He just shook David's hand and nodded. Then the mayor of Millbrook came onto the stage. "Marcus Webb, on behalf of the town of Millbrook, I want to give you something," the mayor said. "We are declaring December 24th as Marcus Webb Day in our town. Every year on this day, we will remember what you taught us, that every person has value, that we should never overlook people because of their jobs, that beauty and talent can come from anywhere." The mayor presented Marcus with a plaque and a key to the city. The applause was deafening. But there was one more surprise. Helen Chen returned to the microphone with a big smile. "Marcus, the school board held an emergency meeting this afternoon. They have created a new position at Riverside High School. We would like to hire you as our music teacher. You would still work as a janitor if you choose to, But you would also teach music classes and run the music program. What do you say? Marcus stared at her. A music teacher? His dream from 20 years ago? The dream he thought was dead? He looked out at the audience and saw hundreds of hopeful faces. He saw Emma and Jake and all the students whose lives he had touched. He saw the teachers and community members who believed in him. Yes, he said, his voice choked with emotion. Yes, I would love to teach music. The auditorium exploded with joy. People were hugging each other, crying, cheering. This was more than just a concert. This was a moment that would change their town forever. Helen let the celebration continue for a few minutes, then spoke into the microphone again. Before we end tonight, I have one request. Marcus, would you play one more piece on the new piano? We have not officially unveiled it yet. Would you like to be the first person to play it? Marcus nodded. He walked over to the new grand piano. It was covered with a cloth. Together, Marcus and Helen pulled the cloth away, revealing a stunning instrument. The wood gleamed under the stage lights. The keys were perfect and white. Marcus sat down at the bench. The piano was beautiful and perfectly in tune. He placed his hands on the keys. He thought about his mother, who had believed in his music. He thought about the last 20 years of struggle. He thought about the town that had finally seen him. He thought about the future that was now possible. He began to play. The music that came out was pure joy. It celebrated hope and community and second chances. It celebrated the idea that it is never too late to follow your dreams. It celebrated the ordinary people who do extraordinary things. As Marcus played, people in the audience held hands. Neighbors who had not spoken in years stood with arms around each other. Parents hugged their children. Teachers smiled through their tears. Emma wrote furiously in her notebook, capturing the moment in words. Jake felt inspired to be a better person. Maria thought about expanding her diner. Robert felt hope about finding a new job. The music said everything that words could not. It said that broken things can be healed, that divided communities can come together, that one person really can make a difference, that beauty matters, that hope is real. When Marcus played the final note, he kept his hands on the keys for a long moment. Then he stood up and turned to face the audience. They were all standing, applauding, crying, smiling. He looked at all those faces, and for the first time in 20 years, Marcus Webb felt truly seen. In the weeks and months that followed, Millbrook continued to change. The music program at Riverside High School grew beyond anyone's expectations. Marcus taught classes during the day and continued working as a janitor at night because he loved both jobs. Students from all backgrounds joined the music program. Some were talented, some were not, but all were welcome. Emma's creative writing club continued to grow. They published a book of stories and poems every semester. Emma went on to college with a full scholarship and became a teacher herself, always remembering to see the invisible students. Jake Morrison's basketball team won the regional championship that year. More importantly, they remained close friends who supported each other. Jake learned that being a good teammate meant being a good person. Maria's diner became a gathering place for the community. She expanded her business and hired more staff, including Robert Chang as her manager. Patricia Hayes started volunteering there, serving food to families who could not afford to pay.